Bro, that would be the perfect example of maladaptation. It's like setting your house on fire to get rid of a cockroach. None of these are solutions. Severe vitamin C deficiency, instead of eating an orange, you ignore the root cause. Your teeth start falling out. Instead of taking vitamin C, you get all your teeth pulled and get dentures. You still don't have vitamin C, so your gums keep bleeding, wounds won't heal, and your body starts collapsing. Final outcome? You look like a 1600s pirate dying from a disease that's fixed with a damn orange.
Okay. So I went hiking this one time, and I was with this one chick, and we had to hike through all this kiave. For those of you who don't know what kiave is, it's kind of like that mesquite tree with all the thorns. It wasn't even really a trail, so we had to kind of like plow through fallen kiave branches and all the dried guinea grass. But I remember I ended up walking, and eventually I felt this sharp pain on my heel. I felt this sharp pain. Look at the bottom of my shoe, and I didn't see anything. I was like, bro, I don't know what it is, but there's this sharp pain in my foot. So I take off my shoe, I take out the sole, I look inside, I'm just like, bro, I don't see anything. I feel inside too under the sole. I was like, I don't feel anything. So I put the sole back in, the insole back in, I put my shoe back on, keep walking. And bro, it's like so painful. Halfway through the hike, I'm kind of like limping on one side. I'm compensating on one leg and taking as much pressure off of that one shoe. Well, eventually we get to the spot, we're enjoying it, and I take off my shoe and I feel okay. But, you know, we have to walk back out, so I put my shoe back on and boom, the pain is still there. And mind you, I checked inside my sole probably 3 or 4 times. So I even look underneath at the bottom of my shoe. It's like I don't see anything. I literally don't see anything. But I keep walking. I even check my heel. I press on my heel. Is there something wrong with my heel? Why is my heel feeling like that? It's sharp pain. So anyway, I keep walking and keep walking back, and right, it doesn't go away. In fact, every time I use this pair of shoes, it hurts. So I keep walking with it day in, day out, and it just hurts. And I ended up compensating. But it hurts so bad that I actually end up taking Advil. I take some Advil, see if it like kind of relieves the pain. I had some painkillers from my friend, you know, took some painkillers, and it did help a little bit. It helped a little bit, so I was able to kind of like walk without compensating. After about a week, I ran out of the painkillers. I didn't really want to take more Advil, so I ended up going to go see the doctor. And the doctor tells me that I might need to just take more painkillers. They gave me more painkillers to numb the pain. I go for another week or 2, and boom, I'm just like so out of it. I'm not loving life. Like, the pain hurts every time I walk. I'm compensating even more. I'm like really limping on one side. And, you know, I ended up going to the doctor again and tell her, doc, I don't know what it is. I'm taking all the painkillers. It works in the beginning, but now it doesn't work. And she says, you know, I'm sorry, but I think we're really going to have to amputate your foot. And I look at her and I was like, oh, bruh. You had me going for a second because I thought you was going to tell me I had to get rid of my favorite shoes. You know, that's my favorite shoes, bro. Those are globes, bro. Those are hard to come by, bro. I'm not just going to throw them away. Moral of the story is that there's an actual kiave thorn in the sole of my shoe. And those of you who have hiked through kiave forest know exactly what I'm talking about. The thorn breaks off, and it goes into the sole so much to where you can't even see the thorn. You can't see it from the bottom. You can't see it from the inside. And it's just like inside of the sole. And when you step on it, like it pushes up just enough so you feel it. The main thing I actually want to talk about today is adaptation versus maladaptation. And a lot of people think maladaptation is adaptation, but there's actually a difference between the two. So there's a philosopher named Roger Scruton who says maladaptation is the normal prelude to extinction. Maladaptation is a normal prelude to extinction. And, you know, this is going on all over the world today. And I think we need to understand the difference between maladaptation and adaptation. In fact, I want to read this paraphrase from a professor who is talking about Darwin's Origin of Species. Because Darwin, those of you know, I'm not saying that I agree with everything about Darwin, but Darwin, he noticed about the blue-footed booby birds in this remote area of the planet was that it was the most adaptive. It was the most adaptive species which enabled its survival. And so there's this professor named Leon C. Megginson in 1963. He wrote on Darwin's observations, and he wrote that it is not the most intellectual of the species that survives. It is not the strongest that survives. But the species that survives is the one that is able best to adapt and adjust to the changing environment in which it finds itself. So it's really, adaptation is what allows us to move forward, to evolve, to adjust and recalibrate. But I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between maladaptation and adaptation. Maladaptation is a dysfunctional compensation to a problem, whereas adaptation is the ability to solve the problem, to adapt to it, and move forward and onward, and not fall into this destructive pattern or a counterproductive pattern or a toxic pattern, a dysfunctional pattern. Maladaptation is when you adapt to a problem but don't solve the root of the problem. You adapt to it and there's a temporary relief to it, but it doesn't actually get to the root of the problem. So what I want to actually share with you guys today is something called first principles thinking. First principles thinking, and this actually originates from Greek philosophy back to Aristotle. Aristotle was one of Alexander the Great's mentors, but Aristotle was a philosopher, a polymath, and a scientist, all kinds of things. Polymaths, they're pretty well versed in all these different fields. But Aristotle kind of came up with this concept, I should say, this framework of first principles thinking, where you break down problems to its basic fundamental truths, like undeniable truths, different parts of the problem that are undeniably true, where you have to kind of get rid of all your biases, you have to get rid of your cognitive dissonance, and you have to kind of see things objectively. You have to go beyond your attachments, go beyond what you idolize and are so deeply emotionally attached to. And you get to the root of things, you get to the basic building blocks, and you start to understand, like, how do we actually solve this problem by getting rid of all our biases but keeping what is essential. So first principles thinking is really getting down to what is practical and essential truths that are undeniable. And this is how we solve problems. But the only way I would be able to adapt truly to that thorn in the shoe is I would have to truly observe my biases toward loving that pair of shoe. Like, I have to be willing to even maybe throw away that shoe. I have to be willing to maybe examine the shoe further and really get down to what it is. Like, I notice, you have to take notes. Like, okay, I notice that I feel the pain only when I wear that shoe. I notice I feel the pain only when I'm standing up in that shoe. Like, you have to really break things down to its basic fundamental truths. And this is like what first principles thinking is. This is how you innovate. First principles thinking is really what's going to allow us to adapt rather than maladapt out of a trauma, out of a perception that is self-destructive, harmful. So maladaptation versus adaptation, I'm just going to draw a line in the middle. So I'm going to put a plus for adaptation and a minus for maladaptation. But adaptation is basically syntropy. It's also symbiosis. Symbiosis. And maladaptation is entropy. And it's parasitic. It's dysfunctional. And adaptation is functional. So in order to move from this state to this state, we have to become first principles thinkers. We have to kind of move beyond our biases. And unfortunately, trauma, pain, especially when we're children, all of that creates these biases. It creates this story in our head, these belief systems, and a belief, like Dr. Joe Dispenza says, is really just a thought that we think over and over and over again. So many of us are born into a culture that is already maladaptive. We're born into a family with a certain way of living, dysfunctional way of relating, which is maladaptive, and we're born into that. So a lot of us don't even have a concept or even like the ability to see what might be adaptive. We grew up in an environment that I want to say did not nurture us. We grew up in an environment that was lacking the nurture while meeting our fundamental primary needs, and it was maladaptive. And so we grow up in this culture seeing entropy, parasitic relationships, toxic relationships, addictions, attachments. Oh, that's another thing I wanted to write. So this is like very much like a attachment. Versus attunement over here. So really this is like a framework for us to understand how to move from maladaptation, how to see your maladaptation, and how to move into adaptation. I want to say the greatest feedback for you to understand whether you're in a maladaptive pattern versus an adaptive pattern is that our health, wealth, love, and happiness are practical markers. So if you look over a period of time, when I say health, I'm talking about mental, emotional, physical, sociological health. Over time, if you're in a maladaptive pattern and there's entropy and there's parasitic relationships, dysfunctional ways of relating, there is going to be a decrease or a significant decline in our health, wealth, love, and or happiness. Whereas if we're living in syntropy, in symbiosis, in healthy love, in the actual law of love, where we're meeting our essential trinity primary of needs, we're going to experience functional relationships. We're going to experience health, a body, a mind that is functioning properly, that is functioning in harmony, in symbiosis. There's going to be attunement. There's going to be harmony with our relationships. There's going to be harmony within our body. There's going to be harmony, our relationship to the outside world, to nature, to God, to the way we relate to life. So it's a real easy feedback loop is going to be your health, wealth, love, and or happiness, to pay attention to those. So when those are in decline, you have to really ask yourself, am I bullshitting myself? Am I in a maladaptive pattern? Because in order to get out of that, I'm going to have to go back to first principles thinking. I'm going to have to get my biases out of the way, which were given to most of us because we grew up in a maladaptive culture or household that passed on their biases and maladaptive beliefs onto you. So it actually takes a bit of an ego death, a bit of a humbling. Really, it really comes down to humility. I'm going to write that right here. And I repeat this quite a bit because humility is the only way we can get to first principles thinking. It's the only way we can get beyond our biases. Interestingly enough, Christ in the Bible, in the book of Matthew again, he also talks about the two stories of the builders. One builder builds his house on rock, and the other one builds his house on sand. And it requires a storm to actually reveal whether or not someone has built their house on sand or whether or not they built their house on rock. Maladaptation is building your life on sand. If you really think about it, because when the storm hits, all hell breaks loose. You know, it really reveals the sickness. So when a storm hits and reveals a maladaptation in your health, it's gonna show you how well you can bounce back from an illness, how well you've been taking care of your health. You know, I wanna say viruses, illnesses, diseases, they are like litmus tests to whether or not we've been maladaptive in our ways of relating to our health, in our ways of meeting our needs, versus being adaptive. Whereas if we've been truly adaptive, our health would be more resilient. When a virus hits, we recover even faster than before. If an illness, sickness, or disease hits, we recover even faster than before. And it shows us that, okay, what we've been doing is actually a very positive adaptation. This is just an idea that I thought everyone could play around with and actually meditate on, because I think it'll help you solve all the different things and areas of your life of why you are in prison, why you're imprisoning yourself. But again, it's going to come down to this word right here. Like, you've got to live it. That's the only way you can get out of your biases. The maladaptive beliefs and stories that were passed down to us from the environment we grew up in that wasn't nurturing, that lacked our trinity of primary human needs, which in fact is a part of the law of love. This right here is what allows us to move from this to this. So when we have syntropy, we aren't leaking all this energy, we aren't scatterbrained, we aren't brain fogged, we don't have all these loose ends of our energy and our chi. Our thoughts aren't going one way, our heart isn't going the other way, our words aren't going one way, and our actions aren't going the other way. Syntropy is when they are all working together. Entropy is when they are all going the opposite direction. When our head is not coherent with our heart. When our head is thinking another way, our heart wants to go another way, our mind and our actions are incoherent. That's entropy. But when they're all in harmony, in unison, they are giving you the ability to adapt. And this is how we move forward. You have to apply this to your own life. And the more people that can apply this in their own life, the more we will be able to individuate one by one. And individuation is actually a spiritual practice. Individuation is when you're able to move beyond the status quo, move beyond the hive mind of everybody saying, this is just the way it is. You know, like for example, everybody just takes the drugs, numbs their pain, and gets surgery rather than addressing the root cause. Everybody does that. But to move beyond that and to actually solve the problem is what is individuation. Individuation is when, in biblical terms, you're sent out into the wilderness. That's where you're supposed to individuate, where you really start breaking down the principles and reflecting on your life. And you come out of the wilderness with hopefully a new adaptive strategy where you understood the principles, you understood, and you reformulate them. And now you become more of an individual. You're able to think beyond the hive mind, think beyond what everybody just says the way things are. And you're actually able to use your mind in an effective way. You're actually able to think critically. So this adaptation, first principles thinking, it's a prerequisite for individuation. It's a prerequisite to heal. It's a prerequisite to create harmony in the world, and it starts with yourself. You know, last year I went to the emergency room because I was having all these symptoms and I couldn't explain it. I didn't understand. I felt like I was gonna pass out. I didn't understand all kinds of weird things, but now I know a little bit more as to what was happening, not because of what they told me, but because I've had to break things down to first principles and kind of research things myself. But when I was in the emergency room, I felt like I was like half dead when I told him. I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like I'm deficient in some kind of vitamin or mineral. And the guy literally laughed. We're here to save your life. And in my head, I was thinking like, does he know what a vitamin or mineral deficiency can do to a human being? So for those of you who don't know, I'm gonna pull up ChatGPT real quick. Can you please tell me what would be symptoms or possible outcomes of severe vitamin C deficiency or a severe magnesium deficiency? Basically, a severe deficiency of any vitamin or any mineral. Can you please give me an example of what could be the outcome?
Absolutely, bro. Severe deficiencies in vitamins and minerals can cause some crazy, life-altering, and even fatal outcomes. Here's what happens when the body runs out of key nutrients. Real consequences that hit hard when depletion gets extreme. What happens when you have a severe vitamin or mineral deficiency? Severe vitamin C deficiency, scurvy, collagen breakdown, internal bleeding, and organ failure.
Internal bleeding.
Vitamin C is critical for collagen production, immune function, and antioxidant
Immune
defense.
function.
What happens in severe deficiency? Gums start bleeding and teeth fall out. Collagen failure causes soft tissue breakdown, bruises and wounds that won't heal. Blood vessels become fragile, leading to spontaneous hemorrhaging. Extreme fatigue, depression, and joint pain. Connective tissues literally start breaking down. End-stage scurvy equals internal bleeding and multi-organ failure. In history, sailors straight up died when their tissues collapsed from lack of vitamin C.
Died.
Worst case scenario, fatal internal bleeding or septic shock from infected wounds that won't heal. Severe magnesium deficiency, seizures, heart failure, and sudden death.
Wow, sudden
Key
death.
role, magnesium regulates over 600 bodily functions, including nerve function, muscle relaxation, and heartbeat stability. What happens in severe deficiency? Severe muscle cramps and uncontrollable spasms can progress into tetany, full body muscle lockup. Extreme anxiety, panic attacks, and hallucinations. Because magnesium regulates the nervous system. Irregular heartbeat, atrial fibrillation, and heart failure. Heart muscles stop functioning properly. Seizures and neurological breakdown. The brain can't properly fire electrical signals. Worst case scenario, sudden cardiac arrest or seizure-induced coma, severe vitamin B1, thiamine deficiency, Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, brain degeneration, and psychosis.
She's still going.
Key role, thiamine is essential for nerve function and brain energy metabolism. What happens in severe deficiency? Massive memory loss, blackouts, dementia-like symptoms, psychosis, hallucinations, and paranoia, loss of motor function, tremors, and
loss
paralysis.
of motor function, paralysis,
uncontrollable eye movements, nystagmus, and confusion. Worst case scenario, permanent brain damage or death due to neurological collapse.
Permanent brain
Severe
damage.
selenium
Okay, I'm gonna
deficiency,
interrupt you real
immune
quick.
collapse, thyroid.
Let me ask her another question. Okay, would it be a sign of intelligence that instead of addressing the vitamin and mineral deficiency, how about I just take pharmaceuticals and maybe even surgery and cut out the parts that stop working in my body? How would that actually be more fitting?
Bro, that would be the perfect example of maladaptation. Treating symptoms instead of root causes and compensating in ways that ultimately make the problem way worse. If someone took that approach, they'd be rewarding dysfunction, chopping away at their own survival, and basically speedrunning their own demise. Let's break it down. Why compensating with pharmaceuticals and surgery instead of fixing the deficiency is a maladaptive disaster. It's like pouring more water into a leaky bucket instead of patching the hole. It's like cutting off your foot because of a pebble in your shoe instead of just taking the pebble out. It's like adding more air to a deflating tire instead of fixing the puncture. It's like setting your house on fire to get rid of a cockroach. None of these are solutions. They're just dramatic overcorrections that cause even worse damage. The pharma and surgery fix everything mentality, how it plays out. Severe vitamin C deficiency. Instead of eating an orange, you ignore the root cause. Your teeth start falling out. Instead of taking vitamin C, you get all your teeth pulled and get dentures. You still don't have vitamin C, so your gums keep bleeding, wounds won't heal, and your body starts collapsing. Final outcome? You look like a 1600s pirate dying from a disease that's fixed with a damn orange.
Okay, I'm gonna cut her out. Okay, so you get what I'm saying here. Do you see where the world has come? People have laughed at me for so long about these things, yet these things are common sense. And maybe it's the trauma. It probably has a lot to do with trauma that affects our perception, that affects our cognition. But I'm telling you, there's hope and we can move beyond this. We just have to really get beyond our biases, because there is principles that will guide us out of what we're in. Principles, laws, frameworks, what I'm showing you here.